Good afternoon, welcome back to Fite Sports Uncovered. I'm your host, Mark Joubert, and we're coming to you from our studios here in Randburg. Big weekend of punchy kicky behind us. If you weren't watching what took place, European Combat Sports is back with KSW putting together KSW 53, their first event since the global pandemic hit. And then obviously it was the very first installment of Fite Island out in Yas Island in Abu Dhabi. Yeah, we're talking UFC 251. And then on Wednesday night, we had that fantastic bout where Kelvin Kattar secured and continued his run for a title shot with that unanimous decision victory for him. Looking ahead at this weekend, a big talking point has got to be that big title fight. Yes, it's Benavidez versus Figueiredo 2. We all know how the first one panned out. What's going to happen at this event, the third installment of Fite Island, coming to you from Yas Island in Abu Dhabi. But the big news here in South Africa is the fact that contact sports, gyms, facilities can now open. And my guest today in studio, he's going to be talking all about that. Talking about my guest, I just got to look at his CV a little bit, but my guest today, he is a martial arts master instructor at the Alchemy Academy, or the Alchemy Center here in Cresta in Johannesburg. He is graded 7th Dan in combat Tang Soo Do, and he's also the General Secretary of MASA, that's Martial Arts South Africa. Gregory Hart, welcome to Fite Sports Uncovered, and hopefully I've done some good stuff in sort of introducing you like that. I suppose I could talk about so many other things.
Thank you very much, Mark. Nice to be here. Nice to be with you in studio. Yes, it's been quite a road in martial arts the last 30 years.
30 years?
Yes. And the 7th Dan is quite a new thing. I'm still getting used to that. That's quite huge in any martial art.
Absolutely.
That happened last year. And Tang Soo Do is sort of a Korean martial art that you might know of, and it has had a lot of influences from the Japanese systems, having been occupied by the Japanese for a long time. The Koreans have that mix of sort of Japanese kung fu and then traditional subak or Korean arts that make up Tang Soo Do, and it's a forerunner sort of taekwondo, which is the national sport of South and North Korea, which gives them their national identity. Tang Soo Do has obviously been made famous by big players like Chuck Norris.
Absolutely. I was just going to say, he's obviously the man that's really taken it to the fore.
He's definitely the poster boy for that. But a lot of traditional Korean Tang Soo Do guys were invited back by GIs at the end of the Korean War in the sort of early 60s to come and teach their Tang Soo Do in the States. So it's incredibly widespread in Europe and America. It's relatively unknown here in South Africa, but we've been slowly putting it on the map.
So let's just take a step back. You spoke about 30 years in the martial arts game. 1994, if I look back at some of your accomplishments, you've been competing and winning world championships since 1994. You've represented South Africa on a number of occasions. You've grown some of the top talent in martial arts through the Alchemy Center, linked directly to you, and then obviously all of this, the backdrop of Tang Soo Do. So first question, all the way back to 1994 and maybe earlier, why Tang Soo Do when karate and judo at the time were probably the two dominant choices?
Well, as a typical South African schoolboy, I loved all my different sports when I was at school. So I used to do my rugby and my cross country, and I was in the hostel, so we did everything under the sun, even inter-house water polo and whatever was going. And then when I went to university, I was looking around for something that could be more of a sort of lifestyle choice and that would keep me sort of fit and supple. I was quite adamant that it had to include sort of flexibility. And so I consciously wanted to look at the martial arts. I continued to play my rugby and do my other sports, but I knew that I wasn't going to be a 50-year-old rugby player. Whereas I've seen all the movies and I see all these Chinese guys of 90 plus still looking good and doing their Tai Chi in the parks and stuff. So I thought martial arts is the way to go. And then also the self-defense aspect appealed to me. I'd been a skinny kid and pushed around, and you can imagine in the hostel you have to stand your ground and whatever. So I really enjoyed the sort of empowerment that the martial arts and the self-defense aspect brought. So that's how I got into it. When I went to university, I was looking specifically for karate because that's all we sort of knew in those days. I'd done a little bit of judo in primary school, and I enjoyed the grappling and throwing aspect of the judo, but I was looking more for the kick and punch. And when I went to sign up at the different sports at Wits, there was this third table there with this guy sitting with this Tang Soo Do, and I asked him exactly what you've asked me. Yeah. What is this? And he said to me, well, we do the kicking and punching like the karate guys do, but we also do some of the grappling and wrist locks and self-defense, a bit like the judo, jiu-jitsu guys do. And then we've also got the weapons syllabus. And so I thought, well, this looks like a more sort of comprehensive package, and more what I'm looking for. So that's where I started the Tang Soo Do.
So decision later, years and years later, 30 years experience in the martial arts space. That's obviously led you to a more administrative role as part and parcel of your daily duties, hence MASA. So let's talk about MASA. Who is MASA? What is MASA? I mean, you're the General Secretary of MASA, so you're one of the top dogs, if I can call it that, within MASA. Why does MASA exist?
MASA represents all non-Olympic martial arts in South Africa. We are the national federation, which belongs to SASCOC. So SASCOC, there's sort of 74 national sporting federations that belong to SASCOC, and MASA is one of those. And the reason it sort of formed was, and the reason I was able to compete and get my Protea colours and the recognition is due to the formation of MASA sort of 34, 35 odd years ago. And it was a sort of a coming together of the smaller, more emerging martial arts. So karate was reasonably well known. Judo was already an Olympic sport. You had your crickets, your tennis, etc., all well known. But the smaller sports, the Muay Thais, the Tang Soo Dos, Taekwondos, and later on the kickboxing and MMAs, they didn't really have a voice or a way in to getting the recognition for their athletes that SASCOC and the bigger sporting bodies can offer. So by standing together and forming an umbrella body that represented all those sports, they gained the sort of provincial and national footprint, which allowed them to register and become the national federation. And that's how martial arts South Africa came into existence, and that's why we're here now.
So looking at MASA, essentially we're looking at a non-Olympic martial arts federation that is the federation that looks after all the other federations, and you report directly into SASCOC. So you disseminate essentially all of what comes down from the top level and get it down to all the other federations, who in turn, hopefully, get it to their members.
When you look at the origins of SASCOC, it used to be NOCSA, which is the old National Olympic Committee, and then the National Sports Council. So SASCOC now amalgamated those sort of Olympic sports and all the rest of us into the body. But you're still trying to get recognition as a smaller sports competing with the high performance sports and the Olympic sports. So we've stayed relevant because we represent martial arts South Africa there, without all those different little or smaller martial arts having to have representation at SASCOC. And we, yes, disseminate the information that's relevant down to them. And we also liaise back with them when they need permission to tour or go to their various world championships and they need to apply for national colours, provincial colours, that kind of thing. We facilitate all of that back up to SASCOC and the various sports confederations, provincial sports confederations as well.
In essence, you're an amateur body. I know at one stage there was a professional block within MASA, but right now, as MASA exists today, as you sit here in front of me, it's essentially an amateur body with a professional block that's currently taking a hiatus.
At the moment, we're mostly catering for the amateur sports. We do have members that have obviously a professional aspect, like MMA SA, like the kickboxing block, and so that, as you said, the professional block is not functioning too much at the moment, but as and when it's needed, and hopefully it will be. Hopefully we will get more interest in martial arts, and there are certainly other players to the game that want to have more of a professional fighting capability. The Korean block, the kickboxing block, the Muay Thai guys, as you've mentioned earlier, and obviously the MMA guys. And it's quite nice that those guys sort of get to administer themselves and make up their own rules, and that's how we would do it at MASA.
So looking at the representation within MASA, I see that there's a Korean block of martial arts, but I don't see a Chinese block or a Japanese block. Or is that by design, or is that just sort of default, just based on the history in terms of the build-up of MASA?
Originally in MASA, it was sort of organized along sort of cultural lines. And so we did have a Japanese block, we did have a Chinese block, we did have the Korean martial arts block. And then we would imagine that we end up having a Thai block or a Brazilian block or whatever, depending on the thing. You could have in the Brazilian block, you have things like capoeira and obviously BJJ and different things like that. So that was the original sort of thing. And it's just an administrative kind of grouping. There's nothing really there in terms of control or whatever. It's just so that we can put similar arts together and group them together. The Chinese block broke away a few years back in 2008 when contemporary wushu was a demonstration sport at the Olympics, and they now affiliate directly to SASCOC. And unfortunately, we lost all those other Chinese martial arts, the various other kung fus, the wushu and the Shaolin, and we also lost the Tai Chi members that we had at that stage. So that was a pity. We still do have very strong Japanese block. We're busy going through a little bit of a reorganization process because those simple delineations just on cultural backgrounds are not working as well as they used to. So we're looking more at sort of grouping the people by the systems, maybe the grappling arts together, okay, and the stand-up arts, and then some still along the cultural lines where it makes sense. These are sort of arbitrary delineations just to help us with the administration of the martial arts. The members all look after themselves. They're all independent. They all have equal voting rights at MASA, and so it's a very democratic system. The EXCO, which I belong to, is elected every 4 years, and we help to run the organization for those 4 years. But all the decisions are made by the members. We've got at the moment 28 different member organizations, and they vote at council once a year at the AGM, and that dictates the policies at MASA.
Although you've heard a little bit about what MASA does, who they represent, and why MASA even exists here in South Africa, we're going to dig a little bit deeper with my guest, Gregory Hart, who is the General Secretary of MASA, right here in studio. So we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, it's a lot more to come with regards to MASA. Don't go away.
Introducing the new, fresh, and exciting Rhapsody of Realities app 3.0. The Messenger Angel Rhapsody of Realities just got a new updated app for reading Rhapsody Daily articles. Enjoy reading and listening to your Rhapsody on the go while taking advantage of these amazing features. Brand new design. Enjoy the new design built to take advantage of the latest technologies to make your app experience awesome. It's simpler and easier to use. With just one click, you have access to the article for the day. It's that easy. Sync notes. Pin down moments of divine inspiration while studying the devotional and sync them to the cloud to be available anywhere, anytime. A new interactive store. Visit the store and get all books by Reverend Dr. Chris Oyakhilome for people of all ages and download them to your library. Store your favorite books in an easy access folder. Enjoy unlimited access when you upgrade to our premium subscription. Gain access to the complete package of Rhapsody of Realities every month. This includes the entire month's devotional on the go with free audio devotional add-ons. Track your reading habits daily with our automated calendar and identify unread days for the devotional. Read further studies right within the app. Download the new Rhapsody mobile app today for free and be inspired anytime and everywhere on the go. Available on the Google Play Store.
Welcome back to Fite Sports Uncovered, and if you've been following the first part of the show, you'll know that we have been chatting to my guest from MASA, Gregory Hart. He's the General Secretary at MASA, and so much to talk about that we've actually turned this into a two-part series. So right now you're watching part one of a fascinating unpack as to who MASA is, what MASA do, and most important during this time of global pandemic, what exactly have MASA been doing for the various federations that they represent? Now, Gregory, just during the break, I was just thinking, you spoke earlier about back in 2008, Wushu became a demonstration sport at the Beijing Olympics. As a result of that, they broke away because they could now sort of link directly in with SASCOC. Quick question from my side, as MMA and their current drive globally to become an Olympic recognized sport, the minute that happens, is it anticipated that they'll break away from MASA and become their own block within SASCOC?
At the moment, we have had discussions with SASCOC along those lines. We have various sports that have sort of IOC recognition in our Muay Thai block and with some of the other sports. Kickboxing also under the WACO banner has got a big drive on. And what we've come to realize is that move by the Chinese bloc to break away actually wasn't good for the Chinese martial arts in South Africa, because some of those smaller arts that weren't the contemporary wushu, which was part of the Olympic movement, kind of just fell away, and they've sort of been lost, and they now have no link to SASCOC. So the current discussions, as it stands now, SASCOC's very happy with the martial arts administering martial arts by themselves, for themselves, and in the MASA block. All members have equal rights, as I said, so nobody is disadvantaged or unnecessarily advantaged by being a member of MASA. And we provide that sort of facilitation, that administration, and take on some of that burden from them. And that's where we've been very effective during this pandemic, by drawing in various resources. And so I don't see that happening in the short term. Currently, SASCOC and MASA have a very good relationship, and they're very, very happy for martial arts to stay under our umbrella and not have to have a whole lot of extra members, particularly smaller members. I know that sounds, MMA has a big footprint in South Africa, but if all the different arts under MASA had to break away and affiliate separately, it's going to be a nightmare. And the thing is that it also evolves around education. As you gave me 5 minutes just to explain what Tang Soo Do is, you can imagine that's half my meetings with SASCOC. I have to sit down and talk to them about Muay Thai this week, and then next week I have to educate them on sport judo, and then the week after that talk to them about Kyudo, Japanese archery, and different things like that. So the knowledge that we have in MASA is that at least it's martial arts administered by martial artists, and we can represent them very effectively, being martial artists ourselves at SASCOC. And I think it's working for both organizations at the moment.
Absolutely, and I hope it's going to actually stay that way for as long as possible, because I think as much as we can get the fringe sports, if we can call them that, working together, they become a very, very powerful block within the SASCOC environment.
That's true. It's all about representation, and that's what we offer at MASA. It's one of the biggest federations, I would say, for sport in South Africa, when you take all those smaller martial arts and fringe sports into account. It's also a very effective federation because there is a lot of cross-pollination, cross-membership. So, for example, it's not unusual for a member of ours to belong to, say, both kickboxing and MMA, so that they can go and fight in the kickboxing arena and follow their constitution and their rules there, but then also they're allowed to go and compete in the MMA side and that different kinds of things. And we like that synergy where we get that cooperation. It's very good for martial arts in South Africa. Now, I talk about my own background, the Korean bloc. It's been very nice at places like the Arnold Classic and that to get all the different Tang Soo Do's, because there's 3 Tang Soo Do organizations in South Africa, and 6 or 7 different Taekwondo organizations, and all of us get to compete together, and our top guys get to fight out on a generic set of rules, which gives us sort of a lot more big match experience, and gives our fighters a lot more opportunity, and helps to prepare them so that when they go to their various world championships and represent South Africa around the globe, they're better prepared and able to do that. So that synergy and that cooperation is what we'd like to see more of at MASA, and that's what has worked well for our members. And as I said, the cross membership, and what we like to do is try and get everybody to sort of be an expert in their lane or their martial arts. So if you want to do Tang Soo Do, you go and do it with the Tang Soo Do members. If you want to do kickboxing, you go do it with the kickboxing members. If you want to have multiple disciplines, that's fine, but then you must be a member of those different disciplines within MASA.
All at the same time, yeah. Before we get a bit more detailed on the pandemic and what MASA has been doing during the global pandemic and its impacts and effects here in South Africa, what are some of the key challenges that MASA has been experiencing up until, let's call it, end of March?
The challenges that all sports have is to set up all their structures around the country, and that's what SASCOC is asking us to do. They want they always talk about the grassroots kind of representation. They want the sport exposed to as many people, and not just exposed, but exposed on a sustainable and professional kind of level in terms of the content that's delivered. And so that's been a big challenge for MASA to set up those logistics around the country. Mostly it's sort of as I said, a logistical thing and a budgetary. Our members are present in all those provinces, but once again we have the challenge of getting those sort of provincial and district members to a stage where they will work together and cooperate on the level that we've managed to achieve nationally in MASA. The other thing that I was going to mention, I'll just have to think about for a second.
While you're thinking about that, let me ask the following question. In a recent report done by a group of eminent individuals delivered to the sports minister, one of the key unpacks, particularly when you looked at boxing, and boxing was really the only contact sport that was sort of reviewed by this panel, is that boxing is not growing. Boxing is not developing to the point that it should be developing based on, and many recommendations were given, but one of the chief recommendations was the fact that sport in school, what we grew up with as phys ed, yes, as a period every just sort of every second day during the curriculum at school. Yeah. So during that period, that no longer exists in schools. So is that one of the big sort of hurdles that is holding back the growth of combat sports within South Africa?
The fact that we don't do PT in schools?
Well, that physical education, physical training is not part of a school curriculum, and anything, whether it's cricket, rugby, soccer, we've got to do that sort of post-school hours.
The school sports have been under pressure. I mean, teachers used to volunteer their time to be afternoon sports coaches. Okay, and then the pressures on teachers, from the academic side increased, and they were not really able to. And perhaps it was also unfair to expect them to just volunteer hours and hours in the afternoons to go stand on cricket fields and rugby and whatnot. And also school sport has become extremely competitive. Yeah. So a lot more schools, especially those that could afford it, would contract in outside coaches to improve the quality of coaching in the thing. We love sports so much in South Africa that we almost have got it backwards, where a school's reputation is built more on their sporting achievements even than their academics, yeah, which to my mind is a little bit backwards. Even a sport mad person, and I love South African sport as much as possible. So schools have placed so much emphasis on that. And that is one of the other things that I was going to talk about, is that there's been a big drive by SASCOC to try and get coaches and sports coaching recognized as a true vocation, as a true occupation. Because too many of us think of, some guy's dad with the whistle running around the soccer field, with a group of young kids. We don't always think of, the professional organization like Jake White had, with those panel of experts and scientific approaches towards training and that kind of thing. And SASCOC's on a big drive to get that national coaching framework up and running, and to have coaches recognized and get their due. And that's been a big part of MASA as well, is to get that kind of professional approach. Now, a lot of our styles have extremely highly qualified, and in martial arts it's quite difficult because you need to have walked the talk before you can get it. So you normally at least have to be a black belt or whatever the equivalent of that is, quote unquote, in your different style before you can even look at becoming a referee or a coach or an instructor. And then the thing that we found that was a little bit lacking is maybe the academic side of what is teaching, what is communication, what is mentoring, what do they mean when they say coaching, and that kind of thing. And so we've been able to put together a very good educational package to kind of complement what the martial arts are already doing, but bring some of that sort of theory on teaching and what is teaching and communication and all those different kinds of skills to our guys, with a view to helping to get them registered with that national coaching framework, which is going to hopefully get back on track as soon as this pandemic is behind us.
So talking about the pandemic, and I think you've segued quite nicely into the next question. Pandemic hit, country locked down, you're talking about professional coaches, many of them lost their jobs, gyms were closed down, many gyms I know of have literally now, owners have said they've closed down, they don't know whether they'll be coming back. A lot of gyms have been able to keep it going, whether it be through Zoom classes, maybe just the loyalty of members just continually paying all, maybe not all, but just some of their membership fees. And then the government announced the COVID Relief Fund, 150 million rand to assist sports, arts and culture. So first question, MASA's role in assisting with that COVID Relief Fund dissemination of money. What did you guys do and how many federations were you able to help?
We came into that party quite late. I think the information getting from the Minister's office through SASCOC to the national federations, there was a little bit of a hold up there. So we looked at what they had asked us, and they were looking specifically at assisting sort of more professional athletes that may have lost their income and their livelihoods. So we expanded on that and actually applied for a lot of our professional coaches to get relief because their schools and their livelihoods had been shut down. But unfortunately, due to the different time constraints, we didn't meet the crazy deadline that was put forward.
It was kind of mad. I mean, I think when I saw it, it was 2 days. Gyms, facilities, trainers, coaches, athletes.
I think it was announced on the Wednesday. We got it on the Friday. So I was able to send it out to my guys on the Monday, and the deadline was Tuesday.
Yeah.
And so for an organization like ours, it was crazy because I don't have any of that information myself. I have to go to my members and ask them how many of your professional athletes, how many of your professional coaches have a problem. So I think I submitted 28 submissions, and 27 of those were rejected simply for being late and missing the deadline. So, wow. There's been no real chance to resubmit that. The latest round of funding has asked federations if they need help with their running.
But that's been at a provincial level, it hasn't been at a national level.
And it hasn't been at a national level. And we haven't done or looked at that very much. What we've been very busy with is trying to get our gyms back up and running.
So talking about getting the gyms up and running, I mean, there's so much. I mean, the information that is available for every single one of these gyms. I mean, you've got documents. Some of those documents are 37 pages long. There are countless documents I was going through in preparation for the show. I want to come back. I want to talk about a lot of that detail because looking at the letter from the minister at the time that was announced that contact sports could get back to training and matches, and I'm going to come back to that a little bit later, but it sounds very simple. But then when you see what you actually have to do, it's like running a marathon with countless hurdles and hoops and jumps and fire things that you've got to jump through and get done. So, well, Gregory, there's absolutely so much that we can be talking about. Yes, you mentioned a heck of a lot about COVID-19, the plans that you've been sort of focusing on over the last couple of weeks. Unfortunately, that's all we have for this, the first part of our in-depth discussion with MASA. We're going to have to sort of cut it off right there. But next week, we're going to break down everything that MASA has been doing to help these gyms, to help these athletes, to help you as that weekend warrior get back into the training facility that you've been missing for the last number of months. Until next week, protect yourselves at all times.